I think we're
Right.
live.
Today is Thursday, August 19th, and this is our weekly developer check-in meeting for Backdrop CMS. Before we get into the agenda, we'll go around and do some quick introductions. If everybody can say what's your name, where you're from, and if you want to share something with us that's not currently on the agenda, you're welcome to do that. I'll go first. My name is Jen Lampton. I'm joining from Oakland, California. I'm very excited about some of the CSS improvements that are going into Backdrop Core. For the admin theme. Let's be very careful about that. So not to break anyone's ice. And that's it for me. How about Justin? Do you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Justin Christopherson in Denver, Colorado. I just volunteer on infrastructure things when I can. Luke?
I'm Luke McCormick in San Ramon, California. I'm very excited about the updates to backup and migrate. And so I hope to slide those in later. I also, even though I've not done much programming lately, have done little bits of programming that I'm kind of, hoping to get into Backdrop. So I maybe want to try to bring that up at some point. Let's go to Robert.
I'm Robert Lang, bug folder on the internet from Altadena, California. And I've been spending time on backdropcms.org stuff like pass it down to Greg.
Hi, I'm Greg. I'm joining from Greece. I was away for a couple of months and back now to the issue queues and trying to catch up with the community and things that can be done for the next release. Pass it on to Tim.
Hi, I'm Tim, St. Paul Tim in Deerwood, Minnesota, and haven't been in the issue queue much lately, but I'm trying to dive in here in the last 10 days of a little over almost 2 weeks of this release cycle, see if I can help shepherd some things into the next release. So, who did Jen?
Just me.
I don't know who we did.
I'm last. Yeah, I'm Nate Lampton from Oakland, California. I'm a quick sketch on the internet, and yeah, ready to get into things.
All right. So let's see. This week we've had one new contributor project released, and that's the image WebP module. Thank you, Justin, for your work on that. And Luke wants to add his enthusiasm for the updates to the Backdrop and Migrate module.
I wondered if you could elaborate on what that is, Luke, and it looks like Tim's smiling as well. What changes have occurred there?
Or Justin.
Luke, you're muted.
So I am. Yeah, I think Justin's the guy to talk about it. I was just I had that Genie experience last week where I was like, I wish Backup and Migrate handled configs as well as the other things. And Jen chimes in with your wish is granted. And Justin is the genie in question, if I'm not mistaken here. So
yeah.
Awesome. So what does that look like now? Is there a release of Backup and Migrate that includes that functionality? There's a new release, and what happens when you do an export? Is it like a zip file and config is included in there as well as everything else, the database and the files?
Justin, can you describe it?
Yeah, that's what happens. So I did in the quick there's like the quick export, quick backup form on that first tab when you go into the module. And I added to the drop-down menu so you can export. It lists separately each directory that's in the settings.php file for the config. So it's like an array, so you can have more than one folder, like active and staging. And so you pick those separately, and then it exports it as a zip file full of JSON files. And the import seems
just-
to work too.
I
Yeah,
just
that's
put
great.
a screenshot. I put a screenshot in Zulip,
Oh.
and it looks like code files. There's a separate options to export config, the active config or the staging config directory. But if you do the entire site, it's not clear to me that config is included.
Yeah, I didn't address that one.
Okay. Okay.
It
Still good, great
will check,
progress.
I think. Yeah. Yeah, that might be something to address in another ticket, I think.
Sure.
We could add that in. The other thing I was thinking about adding was, having an option to grab all the directories at once instead of doing them separately. But it seems like the sites only have usually one configured. But I'm not really sure about that.
Yeah, I mean, with a default install of Backdrop, the staging directory will always be empty.
Yes.
So when you do a backup, all you really care about is live. If you're using like a Git workflow to manage your configuration, it's pretty common that your staging directory is always full because you're always comparing a diff between staging and live and pushing staging stuff. I don't know if it's important to back up the staging directory because that's not representative of what's actively on the site. But I think it's good to have it there in the option so that you can choose it, but I wouldn't include it in the like full site backup because it doesn't really have anything to do with the site. And it might have stuff in there. Who knows what's in there? It might not be a recent snapshot of what's in active or live active.
Does the staging, anything in the staging get imported in that situation automatically? Like you would have to trigger it yourself, right? A sync, I mean.
From backup migrate or from the website?
No, in general, like if you restore your site, including the staging directory, nothing will get imported automatically, right? So
Right.
I don't see any harm in including that as well by default, because it's a full backup of what it is or was on your other side. It won't.
Oh, like if you're
harm
moving to another
Yes.
server or something.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. So
Huh.
whatever in progress work you had on staging, you'd still get to keep that. Now, whether you sync it or not and what you'll do after that, yeah, it's a whole other story. But the purpose of backup and migrate is to take a full backup.
Yeah. So I made sure those options are available when you make a schedule too as sources.
Yep, makes sense.
So it seems to me that I mean, this strikes me as a big moment. This strikes me as a major usability thing, where prior to now, you're able to download Backdrop and create a site and do all sorts of things locally. And then when you wanted to move it somewhere else, there was until now no atomic way to do it. You had to know the different pieces and set them up in order. You had to set up the code. You had to move the database, and you had to move the configuration and get that all to work. Now, if this does what the release says it does, like now there's actually an atomic way to do it. You make a backup, you go into like a new host that's never heard of Backdrop. Install a generic Backdrop, and then move your site with this into it, and bam, you've done the first thing. And at which point you can worry about like what the next steps are. But I've worked on plenty of projects where backup and migrate was the deployment mechanism. That's how it was handled. So it
I never use backup. Speaking of next steps that you said, I never use backup and migrate because I don't have actual sites that I maintain. But it has always like the idea of offering a very minimal sort of like backup and migrate functionality in core when you do updates, upgrades, database upgrades has been floating around for like the error message. Sorry, not the error message, but the warning that we throw to people is, hey, it's a good idea that you take a backup now, and here's a link of how you can do it. Instead of saying the link of how you can do it, we'll have a checkbox that say, hey, would you like us to take a backup of your site before doing anything? or with automated updates that's long been planned, right? So this functionality and sort of like having a precedent of what needs to be backed up being done by a contrib module would help towards that. But hey, these are things that need to be considered. So yeah.
Totally.
Yeah, very exciting. Let's see. Let's move on to the next topic here. Yeah, Jen mentioned that Robert had been doing some updates to backdropcms.org, and I know that we didn't put this enumerate what they were, but I'm curious just to hear generally what kinds of changes have been happening on backdropcms.org and what things we're planning on tackling in the future. Robert, if you're up for it, if you could kind of outline the kinds of problems that you've been looking at and where they've been moving.
Okay, yeah, so there's a recent fix or improvement to how the recommended releases were displayed on project pages, and that's been merged in and is working. But there has been a long-standing problem that the recent releases display, whether old or the update, vanishes randomly from modules. So you go to the project page for a module and there are no releases at all shown. And so this has been around for a long time. And it's an ongoing problem. What we've learned is that first, you can bring them all back just by clearing the cache. And it seems to be narrowed down to the caching of one particular table that for some reason seems to occasionally be stored empty rather than having releases in it. So most recently, as of today, I put in some instrumentation to check when that table is generated and cached and see if it's empty, and at least and then throw some information in the watchdog log so that if it is generated empty, we'll at least know a little more about the circumstances under which it happens, because looking through the code it's not obvious why it doesn't work every time. So that's one thing. Another ongoing thing that we made some recent changes and we'll be making more is related to spam accounts on backdropcms.org. We had been getting about 20 spam accounts per day created on the site, where people would put the spam content in their profile and then link to gambling sites and this and that, the other. And so we made some changes on user registration to put the biography field in the user registration form so that Akismet will look at that and block it if Akismet says it's spam. And that has been happening, but only for a few. Most of the sites are not spammy enough for, most of the accounts are not spammy enough for Akismet to flag, so that they're still getting through. Where Doc Wilmot is porting a SpamBot module. We looked up the IP addresses for some of the spam accounts, and it looks like about 50% of them are in the Stop Forum Spam database. So when SpamBot is up and running, we'll install that, and that should also catch a bunch. Meanwhile, as a stopgap, there is a spam view that I guess Jen had built and added a few fields to it to make it so that just by looking at that view, we can see the accounts that are clearly spam. And then from that view, just go check, cancel accounts. And so once a day, first thing in the morning, last few days, I go to that page, check 10 or 20 boxes and kill those accounts. That's obviously not a long-term solution, but I think if we build up some multi-layered defenses, we should at least be able to get the number down to only a handful per day, and maybe get rid of them all. That's all.
Awesome. Yeah, that sounds like a lot of good improvements. And thank you for your diligence in cleaning up those spam accounts. That's wonderful. I think at some point we'll probably always have to have some human moderation in there. So thank you for your time. And it sounds great that we've been improving the tooling a little bit to just make that less tedious process, because there probably will be a human involved for quite some time. So awesome. Wow, that's a lot of great stuff. Let's see. I think that's. Oh, no. We have another topic of general discussion that we wanted to get into before we go into the project update. And that's an issue that Gregory flagged this week, issue 5160, the ability to have JavaScript test execution when we run our automated tests. Yeah, Gregory, you want to summarize kind of what you're thinking here as far as options for getting that implemented?
Yeah,
Why we would want it? I guess
so
the why. Yeah.
The why is easy. Yeah, the why is easy. There's a lot of things that we update. Most obvious that come to mind is CK editor, where we do a lot of manual testing. So we should automate that for obvious reasons, things that we might miss, but also save time. But then, because recently I have gotten back to pull requests, and some of them require using or would have worked better if they used states, and states misbehaves in several occasions. I noticed that in Drupal land, there's a lot of work done to add tests. And so I thought, hey, there's a whole meta of tests being added for every possible state for elements. And I said, could we backport those? But all these depend upon the JavaScript automated testing framework that Drupal has added, which we don't have. So this is why the discussion is happening of should we add it? And then I've done a little bit of resets in the 8.1 version of Drupal. They introduced a specific framework that was based on Tandem.js. Now they've changed to something else. Not now, since 8.5 or 8.6, and now they're trying to deprecate the older one in favor of the new one. So the additional questions there is, do we want to follow their example? Does that tie up with our code base, and would that be the most beneficial one for us? Would it make easier to backport any tests from Drupal to cover our situations? Things like that. But then things that we need to note is that as it is simple test now, it runs with whatever people have already set up on their local, like PHP versions, basically. No, sorry, PHP binaries. But testing JavaScript will require things like Selenium and additional things. The argument there is that we don't have to impose any such complication to developers. So we don't have to require any such tests to run on the local if they don't touch any of that code, but we can set up our automation, our CI, to actually run those tests for them to ensure that nothing is broken. So yeah.
Yeah, there's lots of things have changed so dramatically on the like JavaScript testing side of things, like in the past 5 years, that it's really kind of surprising. Selenium kind of kicked off the like, hey, you can have a browser do something in an automated fashion. But Selenium's API for communicating with browsers, they created it as a standard, as a way to like make it so that browsers would behave consistently or receive commands on how to execute certain things. And so Selenium's standard then was implemented directly by Chrome. So Chrome in particular is kind of the preferred testing tool just because it hardly requires any additional software whatsoever. Like if you install Chrome or Chromium on your testing environment, then you can pass commands directly to it as long as like Chrome is in the terminal commands path, which makes it super convenient because most people already have Chrome actually on their computers. And so the amount of extra installation steps that is required is like super minimal. And that's, in my opinion, preferable over Selenium, which Selenium can still be used in the same way. And then it can talk to any browser, like, well, many browsers, I should say, as like a light abstraction layer in between, like receiving the commands and then passing them off to the browser. I think, yeah, I might lean a little bit more towards the like, let's just go directly against Chrome, but really it hardly makes any difference as far as like the writing of the tests and the sending of the commands to a browser is always the same. It's just a matter of whether or not you put Selenium in the middle or whether or not you talk directly to the browser itself. And so these options weren't available 5 years ago. Like Selenium was kind of the only choice out there, and Selenium was the only way to communicate with browsers. And now it's kind of an optional intermediary. Yeah, I'm excited about the prospects there. And yeah, using something like Phantom.js is completely unnecessary at this point. That was, before browsers could receive commands, like there were these other third-party libraries that kind of acted as though they were browsers, that were basically like headless web browsers themselves. And so, yeah, now being able to send commands to browsers, stuff like that is not needed. And it's better to be using a browser that is fully maintained and is actually what users are using as well. So you get identical results between production or end user browsers and your test suite. So yeah, the nice thing is that we can skip over this JavaScript test base entirely. Just go right to what do they call it? WebDriver test base. That seems, like a reasonable name. Yeah, and just go with that. I don't even think, other than ensuring that Chrome is installed, I don't even think that's going to take any additional software.
Yeah, well, the change record for that does have some instructions there, how you sort of like, they provide some default XML file that configures things, and whether you can choose to run Chrome or Firefox and options like that, but this can be in documentation. Like we can have, and as I said, we shouldn't, or we have the option to not impose these tests to people, not force them to set it up on their local. But we can at least, now that we've started working on Google Actions and providing our own CI and linting, so this can be as part of that.
Mm-hmm.
It seems that there's general agreement from the core side, the core committer side, to go forward something like that, but I wouldn't know how to move it forward. Like I don't have the technical capacity to know what next steps are involved. So if we can outline what's next here, then maybe we can solicit help from people that have the technical capacity to implement it, or backport it from Drupal, I should say, if that's an option.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, looking at this change record, and I'm not super familiar with the approach, like the complete way that Drupal took this, but I've seen in the change record that it's like the tests are being executed with PHP unit, which we don't use, but we use simple test, which is still in Drupal 8 and 9 as well.
Yeah, they're looking to deprecate it on 10, I think, or now sometime, but it's still there.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, I'm not sure. I don't think we want to get into that at this point. I think that we probably would make a new driver for Backdrop. That the testing suite already has like a I can't quite remember what the two ways it executes are. Actually, I think there might be three. There's like something that like imitates like doing AJAX requests as one of the drivers, I think. And then the main one that it uses is the one that just uses curl to do all of the web requests. and Backdrop can create a new class that is like the driver for using a web browser instead. And so the first step is making that new driver for simple test that instead of using curl, it uses Chrome driver or web driver. And then we need like at least one test that actually uses that new driver.
So can I ping you for whenever you have time to sort of like outline the next steps in details, Nate? Just, you don't have to do any of the work, at least the technical direction, basically.
Yeah, I think what I may need to do is look at Drupal's classes and see like if there's already like a simple test version of this WebDriver test base, like, and if that is suitable for porting, or if we need to make some kind of mixed approach where it's like, I think the JavaScript test base probably was only written for simple tests. And so that actually might look like a good template for us to make our new class, but then the implementation we might need to pull from the WebDriver approach. So yeah, I think there's definitely a lot of code here that we can probably port over, but it might not be a direct, one-to-one because our tooling is different.
Yep. All right. I just pinged you there. Might as well sign a ticket to the issue to you.
Okay.
And
Yeah, I see it there.
I imagine that this is a big, rather big undertaking, unless we have one of those moments that, hey, it's already possible.
Yeah, I actually don't think this is as big as it sounds. At least the initial capability, I don't think is actually very tedious, as long as we get GitHub Actions in place, because we need to be able to control the software that's on our boxes more easily. And so GitHub Actions is kind of a blocker.
A blocker there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
And let's just transition that talk right over into GitHub Actions, because that's on the agenda for this week as well. Let's see. Let's also mention that issue is 5160, that JavaScript testing capability for anyone out there listening. GitHub Actions, using that for our tests. We've been moving this direction pretty solidly for the past couple of weeks now. The issue number is 4753. Indigo Zella's work there. We think that we have the pull request for running the tests pretty well figured out. It's executing, it's running the tests, it all looks really great. However, and we also solved one of the consistently failing tests, the Bootstrap page cache test. We've solved that one last week, and that issue is now also out of the way. The only real blocker it looks like we have is that what had been an intermittent failure on ZenCI related to locale module is a consistent failure on GitHub Actions. So we don't have an issue yet for these exact locale module test failures, but it is kind of covered by the intermittent test failure or random test failures issue 1478. So it's mentioned there, but the actual text of the failure is in the GitHub Actions issue 4753. And I think that's our big item now, is that test is failing so frequently on GitHub Actions that it's required that we figure that one out in order to switch over to GitHub Actions. But that seems like that's our big blocker right now, is that we have a test failure. It's just two tests. It's the importing of locale PO files seems to be failing on GitHub Actions. And if we can get that sorted out, that's our big thing there. I think that many of us are very keen to get switched over, because it'll just make our lives a lot better to not have ZenCI fighting us all the time.
I'm gonna suggest something that may sound radical. In the interest of getting things done, can we temporarily disable that test and then try to solve it on a separate issue, or too dangerous? If it's
This-
just about importing PO files, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I know. This issue comes up all the time about like, hey, there's just this one thing. Can we disable or comment it out or something like that? Because the return on the value is a lot greater than the thing that we're commenting out. And as this isn't official policy, but I think as a pattern, the answer to that is always no, we cannot. Because if we leave something for later, it doesn't get done. And so I mean, this probably isn't a big task to fix this issue, but it could be like a frustrating one, you know, and that's the sort of thing that's like, oh, here's this problem that requires a very unique environment to set up and nobody can reproduce it, is the exact sort of thing that we would never go back and fix.
Okay, fair enough. Fair
Yeah.
enough.
So even if the situation was different, I think the answer to that question should be we have to fix it before we merge something. It's kind of like the equivalent of like, can we merge something in without tests, you know, especially if it's something that fixed a regression. And then we have to wait a long time for the test to get written, but otherwise they wouldn't have gotten written at all. So yeah, it's frustratingly the answer pretty much all the time, but
This is also a little different too, because even though the test that's failing is kind of an odd one, we don't know why it's failing. And it could be something that indicates like a problem with the way we've set up the tests. And so it would be good to at least get to the bottom of that. And I think that if we ignore it and then it turns out there's something wrong with the way we set up the test, and then like a month from now, like everything starts failing because of whatever subsystem, I don't know, something weird going on with GitHub Actions. It would be good to make sure that we got all that stuff working. Like it could be some kind of, you know, like language character handling issue, or who knows. But, yeah.
Speaking about odd tests, this thing about the time zone thingy comes to mind. And I thought that we had it figured out, like, was it 2 years ago or something like that? And every now and then it's sort of like, not as often, but it still creeps. And I go, I was 100% sure that I sorted it out. Like I've tested everything. I don't know. Maybe when we move to GitHub Actions, I'll get to have another look at that. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, anyway, GitHub Actions, all in all, looking really good and very promising. That locale module test is where our issue is now.
Can I ask, because I've been away while things have been progressing. It seems to me that we are splitting the amount of tests in 3 sections, in 3 segments. Mm-hmm. Is that happening automatically, or have we sort of like grouped the tests?
So back when we were evaluating other CI providers, when we were on Travis for a little while, we added an option to the run tests.sh script that could automatically split things into fragments or into percentages. And so we're using an existing option that just says run the first third, run the second third, and run the third third. And then GitHub Actions has a matrix capability that says execute the same set of scripts with these different combinations. And we specified the 3 different fractions and the 2 versions of PHP, and then it runs the same thing 6 times in the different matrix options.
Yeah, I noticed that. I just didn't know where that 1/3, 2/3, 3/3 was coming from. What are you saying, that this was a pre-existing option? Mm-hmm. Ready? Okay, cool. That was easy.
Yep.
Okay, cool.
Yep. And I had forgotten about it. But Nicozella was like, oh, there already was this option here. And sure enough.
Right. Cool. Convenient.
Yeah, very convenient. Let's see if there's anything else on that. Just that I think pretty much as soon as we get that figured out, we will move swiftly to disable ZenCI. Once GitHub Actions gets turned on, we'll turn off ZenCI, because there's so many actions that execute now that it's overwhelming, like on the pull request, to see so many things. And there's also a follow-up action or follow-up task that there's a GitHub Marketplace add-on that collapses those 6 different executions into one item instead of being 6. So just making it so that there's not quite so much noise on the pull request page.
We also have a meta issue for linting. Once we come to that, like it seemed like the blocker of getting that done is that there was too much work to be done. Can we take a gradual approach when it comes to that, as in, enable the linting, but for specific things that we have already done, instead of having it fail because the entire code base needs, it would be a huge pull request to get it all done in one. So maybe
Yeah.
we split per module or something like that.
Yeah, we can definitely, like, some of the options that are out there only lint the files that were changed, so that would be a good way of proceeding. Yeah, we definitely can't lint the entire project all in one fell
Yeah.
swoop, and definitely not as the initial pull request. We may even do something like enable, like if we could get linting set up, it's possible that we could automate the linting process like on the pull requests, but not have the action fail. So the linting would be there and tell you, hey, there's some issues, but wouldn't actually block the merging of the pull request, something like that. Because we have a long way to go as far as like making our code base consistent enough to have a linter on it.
So are you referring to like remediation, like automatically linting pull requests and adding another commit on top of that, which automatically lints things, or?
I don't think we'll get there.
Okay.
At least in the initial pass. That would be nice, but it also might not work like the way we might hope.
We want the results of the pass of the linter, so we know what doesn't adhere to standard. So we don't want the test to action to fail if it doesn't pass. So that way, if you're working on a change and you see, oh, there's 4 other changes in this file that are going to fail the linter, you can fix that as part of your other pull request, but it was not going to stop it from getting in. If it's not your code and it's a lot of work, you don't have to fix it.
Okay, yeah, cool, makes sense.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's see. We're running a little tight on time here. We'll move on a little bit here. Just one other issue for 119.4 that we're working on that is showing a lot of progress is issue 3008. Brad Bulger's issue and pull request that he's been working on that allows symlinking the document route has been moving forward. We figured out why the failures are occurring on ZenCI. ZenCI itself uses symlinks, and the tests almost seem to be written in a way that that ZenCI's symlinking may have been set up just to get the tests passing. And so the short of it is that we know what the problem is now, why the tests are failing, and we're just figuring out what exactly is the right solution there as far as symlinking goes. Brad's pull request already solves the major problem of if you use a symlink for the entire web directory route, that installing and updating modules now works correctly. The issue that we have now is deciding whether or not the old behavior is actually correct at all. So it's kind of interesting, like taking a look at that issue and seeing if you're a hosting situation or if you've ever set up a site that uses symlinks, if that situation applies to you or if you think it's a reasonable thing. Some feedback on that issue could be helpful. Yeah, but I'm really excited to have figured out why that's happening and have Brad's work give us some options. Okay, let's see. Well, the last things that we've got to discuss today is that it was mentioned already that we only have, a dozen or so days before the feature freeze of 1.20. And at this point, it's that time where we figure out what is reasonable, like what is close enough that we could potentially get it completed in the next 10 days and start working towards those specific issues. The issues that are on that list include the exposed file name filter for the media library dialog, issue 3293. I think that this one, hang on, I'm pulling it up now. hasn't seen any updates in quite a while. But where it is it's at a point where it needs testing, and does already, I think, need a little bit of extra work there to confirm that the approach is all okay. This one is a JavaScript only testing issue. So this is one of those things that we can't actually test other than manually. So yeah, manual testing is required here. Let's see. Another one that is completely within our grasp is the blocker issue for making recipes possible, issue 3224. And this one is a simple, nearly a one-liner. It's like 1.5 lines fix to make it so that config import, the config import commands are run when a new module is installed. And so the only thing that we need there is test coverage. And the scope of test coverage there probably means making a new test module that includes config, like a new content type in a field, probably. Turning that test module on in the testing suite, and then making sure that the config came in. It's not a huge task as far as test writing goes. But yeah, someone familiar with the process of making test modules and writing a test, that's the component there that is necessary.
Can I, just a side sort of like issue, we've discussed this in the past. I'm not sure that we have an issue for it. Drupal 8 and beyond control which modules are installed via configuration via the core.extensions.yaml file. We do not do that. We rely on the database. Would we want to do that or allow that?
I'd have to think about it. I don't have the answer to that right now.
I'll raise a separate issue. Yeah, because that would allow configuration to be enabling and disabling modules. All right, cool.
Yeah.
I think we have an issue for that already from several years ago, where we talked about benefits and risks. Can be worth looking at.
I think that I think it's probably technically possible for us to do. We, unlike the way Drupal's like management of which modules are turned on and off. They got rid of the system table, but it's still in the database because, at least in Drupal land, all config is in the database ultimately. And so the state of which modules are turned on and off is actually still in the database, just in a different spot now. So I would imagine that our approach would look slightly different, that the config files that are present there probably would just serve as a guidance for how to manage the system table, that turning stuff on and off would just update the system table to match, which would make total sense because it's the same thing that happens for like field creation, that you can't just create a field in the config and expect it to work. You also have to create the matching database tables. So this kind of, we need the config to control what's in the database, is a completely reasonable and manageable thing for Backdrop's config system to handle. And we can do it in a backwards compatible fashion because the system table has to stay there, because there's a lot of things like hook installs, for example, that set the module weight in the system table as one of the things that they do. So yeah, it's possible. Yeah, I think we need to discuss it though.
Yeah, the only issue that I could find was 4160 that was created by Robert last year or 2 years ago, actually.
Okay, we might want to raise a new one. I might be thinking about the Drupal issue where I protested loudly and lost.
I can open a new issue. What would you like it to be? Should we control module status via config?
Because I think we would have to think about doing it more the way we do other stuff with Backdrop, but it could definitely be done. Something where like you would go to import a config file and it would throw an error and say, sorry, you can't uninstall this module unless you do it manually. The same way we handle fields. But like turning stuff on isn't risky. So we could have like, if you're turning it on, we can do that. If you're turning it off, we have to make sure you want to delete your data sort of thing. Yeah, so I think it would be worth having that conversation again.
Yeah, because in that situation, maybe it could help the recipe, the whole recipe thing, like enabling modules via config. But yeah, cool.
Yeah, I think in the land of Drupal, this got into the uninstall versus disable debate too.
Yes.
That whole thing got brought into it, and I'm not quite sure what that would look like in our world.
Yeah, I think we would that. I'm not sure we can do that in a backwards compatible way.
Yeah.
I'm not sure we want to, but even if we did, yeah.
As you said, I think that the enabling of the modules is a safe thing, because maybe that could be step one, and then disabling of modules can be, you know, left for as a follow-up and considered more thoroughly.
Yeah, that's what we do for fields. To elaborate on that, is that fields can't be deleted with a config import. But what you can do is delete the field in the UI. Needs to make sure that all of the data has been cleaned up, and then you can import the config with the field missing. And the config import says, oh, that's fine, because the field's already gone.
I like how we jumped from one issue to another, because I wanted to mention the thing about the body field next. And I have an alternative solution. Yes? Do we have time for it? Like 8 minutes?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I'm referring to issue 5141, where it's a node situation where if you remove all the content types from your site, and then you try to create a new content type, we automatically try to add the body field, which, if you haven't gotten any data in it, would have been removed, and then you get an exception. So you can see how we pass from one issue to another. So there was a previous issue which was raised by BW Panda. It's 3035, where we added the ability to sort of like override, programmatically override whether the body field is created or not. And Peter has started it as we should add it as an option in the UI. And then Nate, you jumped in and said, no, we shouldn't. We just add some way that we can override it. So my thinking was that if we do add a checkbox there that says create the body field, and if the body field doesn't exist, then that checkbox is not ticked. People would just click save, and
but it only doesn't exist for like 5 seconds, and then it exists again. And so I think if the user interface showed you can't do this, that would signal to people you can't ever do this. Where like I think the current solution has like something on the page that says like try back in.
Try again.
Yeah. Because it only is like that until cron runs, and then everything's fine.
Well, I've had something. Maybe I'll raise a separate ticket as an alternative. But on my local, the way that I have it working is that even if it has been completely removed, because that's a situation that can happen, ticking that checkbox basically runs a function that we have, which is called node add body field, which recreates it. So
we wouldn't.
So when you tick the checkbox and it's not available on the system, it just adds a status message there that says this field has previously been deleted. We'll recreate it for you, and just that's it.
Huh. I didn't know we had that function.
Yes, it's basically what the
standard around. He knows everything.
Oh, I don't know everything. It's just I noticed that the standard installation profile basically just executes that command to add the field. It's not.
Do we even need the checkbox? Can't we just do that?
Yeah, I guess. But if you already have the thing, you need to in the background check if it's.
But we could check, and then if it's not there, make it.
Yep. Anyway, I've been working on my local solutions. Like as soon as I have something workable as an alternative, I'll throw that there, and people can chime in.
Cool. Yep. This problem also comes up if you happen to have deleted the body field from all of your content types. So a couple of weird scenarios.
So, and I thought that if there was an easy way to just, if people try to invoke actions that try to automatically add that body field, if it's not there, we just run that function, it adds it, and no error messages, no nothing, it's back there again.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, that would definitely be preferable, I think. Yeah, and part of me thinks, well, if you deleted the body field and you made a new content type, you might not want the body field. Like maybe that was an explicit decision that you just don't want the body field ever. But and I
that's what
see
I'm
where
trying
you're
to
heading,
cover.
where you're heading with that. But I think that adding the option is like it's adding friction because the user has to make that decision every time they create a new content type, and the small overhead of deleting the body field after it's been added it's not really that great. So I would prefer not to add the option and just let them delete the field again manually if they need
I
to.
have to think having a website with no body fields is sort of an extreme edge case.
It
So
is.
it's nice that that's possible, but I'm not sure we should build a tool for that specifically in the core.
Okay, cool.
Let's see. There's one last topic. That's telemetry. Telemetry is a long-running initiative to make it so that we can collect data about the way that people are using Backdrop so that we can make better decisions in the product. The telemetry, well, actually, maybe I'll turn this over to Tim to talk about it for a second or two. Tim
So
is
I
our
can turn it
initiative
back
lead.
over to you.
Okay, never mind. Well, we don't need to do that.
Well, I'll just, yeah, I think that you did work recently that you've updated us, but I don't remember exactly what you did or what the status is. So
Yeah.
what do we need to do to get this into the next version?
Yeah, yeah. So we have some preliminary things that need to happen. We need to get the project module changes merged into project module and deployed onto backdropcms.org. I think that's like something that needs to be done to increase the ease of testing.
So are you the only maintainer for project module?
I think I might be, yeah.
Okay. Well, if you want to do the project module work, I can work on getting it onto backdropcms.org.
Okay. Yeah, it's not, it's literally just updating the module once it's in project module.
Yeah.
And then I think there's an outline of all of the things we need to do in core itself, but we may scope down our ambition there a little bit. Like we could potentially, I think we talked about this, include telemetry module in core, but not actually turn it on or not have an option to turn it on, something like that. And then it would literally be a totally voluntary opt-in. You have to turn on this module, and there's no process to turn it on before that. It might not be in the install profile. It might not have an alert asking you to turn it on. It literally would just be, there's a module that you can turn on that would be off by default. That would,
and if we were worried about it, we could even put it in as hidden. And then that way, like those of us who wanted to test it would know it was there and we could test it, but nobody would turn it on by accident and, accidentally break their site. And then once we're sure it's working, then we make it unhidden but disabled. And then once we have it collecting the data we want, we can turn it on by default. Like I think we can make a nice little on-ramp for it.
Yeah.
All I have to say is great minds.
The amount of work that it does, the telemetry module itself is, it is not a large module. Yeah, it's literally just like, what's the PHP version? What's the MySQL version? Okay, one post request, on a daily basis, weekly basis, that it just sends the data out to somewhere. All of the complexity is in the aggregation and display and storage that is on backdropcms.org. Okay.
It is 3:00 Pacific. I have to go. If anybody wants to do any kind of sprinting for the next release, let me know. I'm happy to coordinate that as I often do. But I have to run right now. So I'll talk to you later.
Okay.